The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, the race to number 2. Unfortunately, the Chicago Bears have already locked up the number 1 pick thanks to Carolina stinking again with their idiot owner. And isn't it nice, by the way, to look at another team and say idiot owner? The idiot owner is gone from here. But in Carolina, oh boy, boy. And Sally Jenkins took him to the woodshed today. I'll go through her column and what Scott Fowler of the Charlotte Observer said about him. Also, Tom Lavero weighs in. A lot of people taking their whacks at Tepper, and we'll get to that coming up. But I want to explore what's going to happen Sunday if both Washington and New England lose. Now, the very simple thing is Washington loses to the Cowboys, and they're 13.5-point underdogs, and New England beats the Jets, and so that gives Washington the number 2 pick. But if both teams lose, then it gets very complicated. And from what Steve Kornacki has laid out here, and he did this on what did he do? The Good Morning Football yesterday. It all hinges on the New Orleans-Atlanta game. And, you know, Washington beat Atlanta. The Patriots lost to New Orleans. So Washington wants New Orleans to win the game, and New England wants Atlanta to win the game. And we'll get the feel of what's going on in Boston with all this stuff with Chris Price, who covers the Patriots for the Boston Globe. He'll join us at 10:20, and we'll try and sort out this whole mess. Ryan Leaf was on yesterday with Dan Patrick. He's with him pretty regularly, and talked about the bust thing. And he is, you know, sort of the patron saint of busts. He has embraced it, has called himself a bust. And I don't know if Bryce Young is that yet, and there are some other quarterbacks who are sort of hinging on that label, whether they are or whether they're not. Maybe the jury's already out on Zach Wilson. I don't know. He's not going to play this week, so that's probably a good thing, or maybe a bad thing. I don't know. Do the Jets have a better chance of winning the game with him or without him? Hard to say. But he has an interesting take on busts. And we'll get to that shortly. But let's unpack what happened yesterday. And Ron Rivera said some very, very interesting things. Usually his news conferences, he's very cooperative, and sometimes he puts his foot in his mouth and says stupid things. But yesterday he said some reflective things and some things that are really indicative of why this all went south. First of all, the big announcement that everybody was waiting for: who's going to be your quarterback on Sunday?
Yes, we're going to stick with Sam.
Is it just because of what you saw, anything last Sunday, or is it because of Jacoby's situation or both?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but I thought what Sam did and went out and did the things that, we were hoping he would be able to do. He did some really good things. I thought he managed a couple of drives very well, very nicely, and, again, want to see him get an opportunity to finish it out.
What else stood out about his game Sunday?
Well, I thought early on, when he had the connections going with Terry, that's the thing that, you've been looking for, you wanted to see, and we got a chance to see if we can do some more of that.
Nobody really explored the Jacoby Brissett health circumstance. Like, that was really the only question about it. Was it a combination of Jacoby or, what was it, Sam or whatever? I just wonder, and if you believe the conspiracy theory that I've thrown out there, is he's got his work on tape. He played very well at the ends of 2 games against the Rams and the Jets, and I don't think there's anything he can do to enhance his value going into the off season. So I don't know. I wonder if this is partly Brissett, that Brissett doesn't want to go out there and play, and so Howell is going to be the first quarterback to start 17 games in a season, right? Because they only had 17 games the last 2 years. The last quarterback to start every regular season game was Kirk Cousins back in 2017. So this will happen on Sunday, where he goes to 17 games and becomes the first Washington quarterback to do that ever, and the first to start every regular season game in, I guess, 6 years. This is another part of the interview yesterday, the news conference from Rivera, and it was about his concentration on coaching in these last 5 or 6 weeks, and I think it addresses really what the whole problem was with Ron Rivera since he came here 4 years ago.
That's what I'm here for is to coach. I've gotten an opportunity to coach. There was a long period of time that I did a lot of managing, and in the last 4.5, 5 weeks, it's really been about coaching. So it's just keeping focus on that has been something that I've tried to do, and just stay where I am. That old expression, be where your feet are.
That's the biggest admission that it's over, right? Because he said he's concentrated on coaching the last 4.5, 5 weeks, which tells you he's not thinking about the draft. He's not meeting with Marty Herney and people like that. He knows it's over, so he's just going to coach the team to the end. But he said he spent a lot of time managing. Well, there's where it went wrong. He was a good coach. He was a good coach in Carolina where he concentrated on coaching. When he got all the responsibilities of running the team, that's where it went south. So if you want to autopsy what happened here over the last 4 years, it's that. It's that Ron Rivera was over his head on that. That just wasn't what he was cut out to do. He was cut out to coach. Probably would be a good coach in another organization, but not here, not where you're trying to run everything. Very few guys are able to do that. And even the good ones don't really succeed when they handle everything. This was as reflective as he got, and sort of bringing a quote that he had last year against him. Listen to this. This is about Nicky Jhabvala asking him about the quest for a quarterback, which he never really found in his 4 years here, and how tough that was.
That's probably been the biggest crux of it all, is trying to find that guy. I mean, that's the hardest thing for anybody. It doesn't matter whether you're here or at one of the other places that are looking for that guy. I mean, you're fortunate if you get a head coaching job where there's a guy, you better relish that and you better succeed. I'll tell you that right now. And I've said this before, if a guy like Alex Smith, if he never gets hurt, I never come here, because I think Jay and what they were doing would have continued. I mean, you get a guy like that, man, you run with it. I promise you that. It would have been cool to have a guy like that. It really would have, because, I think there's a lot of talent in that room. I think there's some good playmakers. In the last 4 weeks, we've only given up 3 sacks. So there's some potential there. But to have a guy that's been there, that's been developed, that's pretty cool. I promise you that if you go there, you're a head coach, and you got to have success. You should.
Have these last 4 years changed your perspective on that position? And then, as part of that, has it changed how you coach the other players who have to deal with a rotation of quarterbacks, like the receivers, as they deal with multiple starters? Well,
I know this. Just reflecting on it, the biggest thing is just how important that position is. I mean, I was fortunate. In Carolina, we had our guy, and for 7 seasons, he was phenomenal. Unfortunately, the shoulder injury, I think, is probably one of the biggest things that really just threw him off track. I mean, he was as good as anybody, and he showed it. Then trying to find that guy is Nicky, as your question, that is the position. I mean, and you see why such an emphasis is being made on protecting that guy, why these guys are getting paid the way they're getting paid. And if you're fortunate enough to have that guy, I mean, I know last year everybody gave me a little bit of grief when I asked me about what's the difference, and I said quarterback. I mean, trust me, it is. It is.
Yeah, well, the big swing and miss was right out of the gate when apparently, I don't know this, but it seems like the way things lined up, that in agreeing to take the job, he was going to give Dwayne Haskins a chance. He passed on an opportunity to take Tua Tagovailoa, who's the starting AFC quarterback in the Pro Bowl, and Justin Herbert, who is a franchise quarterback, although he's not achieved anything on the field in terms of postseason success. But there's going to be a coach there next year, maybe one named Harbaugh or maybe one named Belichick, and they will be good with him. And what you did there set you on a course of the last 4 years where you couldn't find a quarterback, and you had some big swings and misses, including what you did last year. That was a complete and utter disaster. And in your third year, where you should have been ready to roll, Carson Wentz sunk you. And so that's great hindsight there, and it's easy to have that kind of hindsight. But I think a lot of people understood when he took the job, hey, if you're going to try and roll with Dwayne Haskins, it's just not going to work out. We've seen enough of him on and off the field in his rookie year to know that this is probably not going to work out. Last thing from Sam Howell, kind of deja vu. Remember last year at this time, he was getting ready to make his first NFL start, and it was against the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, it is crazy, man. I thought a little bit about that. Just this time last year, I was obviously, getting ready to play my first game, and now I have the full year kind of under my belt. But definitely just so blessed to be where I am and just to be a part of this team and a part of this organization for sure.
When you walked off the field that day, did you know, man, I crushed some of opportunities because of this? Was that on your mind
honestly,
at all?
It really wasn't. I wasn't worried about the future. I wasn't really worried about what could come from that game last year. I was just trying to go out there and play my best and try to help my team win, and that's really all I was really focused on. But obviously, that game kind of helped me get this opportunity that I got this year. So, yeah, every single opportunity you get to go out there on the field, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter how your season's been, it's an opportunity to show what you can do, and that's how I look at it every week.
Yeah, he walked off the field last year after throwing 19 passes against a disinterested Dallas team. He was smart enough to know, I don't know. And Ron Rivera went, yes, we're going to do that. Yes. So that's how desperate he was after the Wentz disaster. Fitzpatrick, not his fault, but lasted only 16 snaps. And then not drafting a quarterback when you took Chase Young at number 2 overall, and then you sent him away for a third-round pick. Let me get to this. I like to do these fun lists. This not really fun, but this will be kind of an oh yeah for you. I looked at season-ending games over the last 30 years and where this one ranks in terms of disappointment. I didn't really rank these. I just went through them chronologically, and you can, in your own mind, determine where this stands among the crushing ending games of the season. I'm not talking about where the playoffs were on the line at the end of the 2016 season when Kirk Cousins threw that crushing pick against the Giants and they were left out. I'm talking about where you get to the end of the season like this one and it's just been a malaise for 6 weeks and you can't wait for the year to get over and how it all wound up. December 31st, 1993, they played a New Year's Eve game. It was a Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock at RFK Stadium. They go into this game 4-11. This is Richie Pettibone's 1 year. Remember, they opened up with a win over Dallas, 35-16. Then lost 9 of 10, including 41-7 at home against the Giants, 36-6 at Arizona. And the week before this game, they lost at Dallas, 38-3. This was just a freaking disaster. They got Chip Lohmiller to kick 3 field goals in this game. Jim McMahon threw for 226 yards and a touchdown. It was Mark Rippon's last game in D.C. He threw for 164 yards and was sacked twice, which was ironic because 2 years before, in leading them to the Super Bowl, he was sacked 7 times all season. That year wound up 4-12. That was the end of Richie. December 22nd, 1996, this also at RFK, Washington beat Dallas 37-10. And you say, whoa, why is that a terrible thing? Well, they were 8-7 at that point, but it started off the year 8-3 before losing 4 straight, including 37-34 in overtime to Arizona. They blew a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter and gave up 615 yards in the game. Boomer Esiason threw for 522 and 3 touchdowns. They lost at Arizona a couple of weeks later, 27-26, and had been eliminated from the playoff picture before they played what was the last game ever played at RFK Stadium. December 21st, 1997, year later. It's now Jack Kent Cooke Stadium they're playing at, and they beat Philadelphia 35-32 to get to 8-7-1, but they had been 6-4, and they got only 1 win in the next 5, including that Gus Frerotte bang your head against the wall 7-7 tie with the Giants, and they had to wait after winning that game against Philadelphia and hope that the Jets would somehow knock off the Lions and Washington would be in the playoffs. But Barry Sanders completed his season of over 2,000 yards rushing, and the Lions went to the playoffs, and Washington did not. December 24th, 2000, also FedEx Field. They played Arizona, and they won 20-3. They were 7-8 going into the game, but it started off the year 6-2. They got to 7-4 with a Monday night win at St. Louis, then lost 4 straight. Norv Turner was fired at 7-6 with Terry Rubisky. They lost at Dallas 32-13 and at Pittsburgh 24-3. December 27, 2003. You depressed yet? FedEx Field, Saturday night. Last game for Steve Spurrier, although he said going into it he intended to come back the next year. Philadelphia beat him 31-7 to finish 5-11. Not too good. Now remember that year they had started 3-1, including a win over New England, but lost 9 of 11, including 27-0 to Dallas. And that was the game where Tim Hasselbeck had a quarterback rating of 0.0, and Jabron Hamden had to finish up that game. It was just an awful year, but they did finish up with a win and wound up 5-11. Spurrier resigned from the golf course a couple of days later. January 3rd, 2009, at San Diego. And let me bring Rex into that. Is that too far back for you, or do you remember that?
I was at that game.
It was in San Diego.
Yep.
You went to San Diego for this?
Yep.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, do tell. What was now? Were you rooting for Washington to win this game?
Yeah, but San Diego was playing all their backups.
Yeah.
I think they had already locked up the 1 seed.
Yep, they had.
Yeah.
And Washington still lost.
Yep.
Everybody knew it was going to be Jim Zorn's last game. But he had started that year 2-2, then lost 7 of 9, including the 45-12 game to the Giants. That was the swinging gate game. Were you at that too?
No,
didn't go to that. And then they lost 17-0 the week before to Dallas. And Zorn was fired either before he got on the plane or after he got off the plane. But they landed 5 o'clock in the morning. And he knew, he wasn't going back to Ashburn. All right, December 29th, 2013. This was at the Giants. Were you at this game? Lucky you.
No, I don't remember this one.
This is miserable weather. This is the last Shanahan game. They were 3-12 going into this game. They had started off 3-5 with an overtime win over San Diego, but lost to Kansas City 45-10. RG3 was benched after coming back. Remember, they had a big win earlier in the year against the Chargers, but he got his job back. Kirk Cousins was given the last 3 games of the year. Remember that he was sat down by Mike Shanahan, who said, I don't usually tell you the truth, but I'm going to be truthful here. Cousins lost to Atlanta by 1 and to Dallas by 1, but in this game against the Giants in the rain, he was 19 of 49 for 169 yards, 2 interceptions, and 3 sacks. And then a day later, they sacked Mike Shanahan. December 28th, 2014, at FedEx Field. Were you at this game? This was
it Philly?
No, it was Dallas.
No.
Okay, Dallas won 44-17. They were 4-11. They had beaten Jacksonville 41-10. They won at Dallas Monday night. That was Colt McCoy winning that game. And then RG3 came back. RG3 got benched. Colt got hurt in the last before the last regular season game. RG3 came back. And then he did throw in his last game playing for Washington 336 yards, 2 interceptions, and 3 sacks.
That was the Philly game. I think his last start was Philly.
Yeah,
I was at that one.
Okay, all right, but this was the last game of the year, though. You're talking about the Philly game.
Yeah,
this was against Dallas. Okay, and then December 30th, 2018 at FedEx. I think that's the one you're thinking about. No,
2018.
2018, December 30th.
Oh, the Giants.
No, that was Philly.
The Chase Young Bowl?
No, because this is earlier than Chase Young. This is 2018.
Okay.
So this is you get
Jay's last full year.
Jay's going to come back. Yeah.
Okay.
2019. So they started 7-8. Were 7-8. Started off 6-3. That's when Alex Smith broke his leg. That was the year. Colt got hurt. Then Mark Sanchez, Josh Johnson. This is Josh Johnson starting this game, I think. And he threw for 91 yards. He was sacked 4 times. Wasn't good. And then the last one was like this, 2019, where the Cowboys beat Washington 47-16. This was Bill Callahan interim coaching. Jay Gruden had been fired at 0-5. They beat Miami 17-16, which had cost them the number 1 pick, as it turned out. You know, he could have had Joe Burrow here, but no. Then they beat Detroit with Dwayne Haskins. That's the one where he was taking selfies and wasn't out on the field for the final snap. But Case Keenum started this last game against the Cowboys. He threw for 206 yards and was sacked a couple of times. So we'll see what happens on Sunday. But I can't remember where there's been this much enthusiasm for losing. You know, all these other games, you go, yeah, they're probably going to lose. This one, it's, gee, I hope they lose, and we're going to be scoreboard watching at 1 o'clock to see what happens with New England. And we'll get a lot more on that in an hour when we're joined by Chris Price of the Boston Globe. But up next, Ron Rivera talking about this must-lose game on Sunday, and also what the Baltimore Ravens are doing with Lamar Jackson, and is that the right thing to do given what happened to them in 2019? We'll talk about that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. About 20 minutes, we'll talk to Chris Price of the Boston Globe and get the picture from Boston where Washington needs the Patriots to win. And if they lose and Washington loses, then what happens? And there's all kinds of scenarios related to what happens with other games on Sunday. The most important one seems to be the Atlanta-New Orleans game. Washington wants New Orleans to win. The Patriots want Atlanta to win. And we'll try and sort out all that stuff. Also, you know, what's going to happen after that game? Is that going to be it for Bill Belichick? And I don't know if the rumors are still flying around. I don't think it's going to happen, but you've heard maybe Bill Belichick to Washington. I mean, wouldn't that be something if the last game he coaches with the Patriots is tied into what Washington does? And, yeah, I mean, how about this? Think of this scenario. If Bill Belichick is going to take the Washington job, and there are reasons he might want to do it, including ownership, which is good, appears to be good, well, good in comparison to what was here before, and they have cap room, and if they do have the number 2 pick, they can draft a quarterback, a really good quarterback who Bill Belichick can develop. So would that be greater motivation to beat the Jets if he knows he's coming here, because that would guarantee Washington number 2? I mean, all kinds of crazy things go into this. And what else do you have to talk about going into the last game of the season for the Commanders? The season's been over since Thanksgiving, for God's sakes. So, yeah, there's nothing else that you can really hang your hat on at this point. Speaking of that, this is Ron Rivera yesterday answering the question that most people want to happen, I think, on Sunday. If you're a fan of this team, you would certainly want to happen what Scott Abraham is asking.
Some of the fans kind of are hoping this team loses in a way because of the whole draft pick situation. What is that like from a head coaching perspective to kind of hear that or see that?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. Just that's the only way I can look at it. To me, it's not what's important, you know, as far as who we are as individuals and people, because you should do things to win more so than anything else, and that's pretty much what we're trying to do, is win a football game.
Yeah, well, that thing he says, that's interesting, not important. It's important to fans. It's important that they lose the game, and I understand the vision that you have inside the locker room. Here's another view of that. This is Jahan Dotson, who was also asked this question about the fans wanting him to lose. And he said something that was very similar to something I heard from Darryl Green some years ago. This is Jahan Dotson yesterday with reporters.
That's just the natural thing of an outsider, someone who's not in this locker room every day, someone who doesn't see us going to practice every day, working hard, being here in OTAs basically all year. So you gotta just block that stuff out, and you gotta realize the people that you have in this room and the people that you go out to war with every single Sunday. And we're trying to play to get W's. We don't care what draft pick we get. But yeah, that's something you could pay attention to, but at the end of the day, it's just a distraction.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. When Darryl Green played his last year, which was 2002, Steve Spurrier's first year, it was chaos. Different quarterback every week. He loved Danny Werfel. He put Danny Werfel in. That didn't work out. Shane Matthews went in. I mean, it was just one thing after another, and it was like, Keystone Cops to fans. And I was talking to Daryl about it. He said, when you're inside the locker room, you don't really feel that. You're wrapped up in winning games, so what's going on in the outside world doesn't really register with you. And I think that's what Dotson is saying. When he goes to work every day, it's about going out there and trying to win a game. Nobody's going up to the whiteboard and saying, well, here are the probabilities of us getting the number 2 pick if we lose. That doesn't work that way. It doesn't work out. Now, Dotson is an interesting story, too. I was surprised. I looked at his numbers. He actually has more catches this year than he had last year, though he seems to have been invisible in the last few weeks. But he had bigger catches last year, played in only 12 games, caught 35 passes, average of 14.9 yards a catch, and 7 touchdowns. This year, he has many more receptions. He has 12 more catches, playing 16 games, but he has 47 catches, and it's down in terms of yards per catch, 10.7. He's only caught 4 touchdowns. So it's not quite as bad a year as I thought, but this was supposed to be a big step-up year for him, and it has not been. More from the locker room. Sam Cosmi on the outlook here going into a game like this.
You're going to get whoever's playing, what position, they're going to play their hardest. At the end of the day, it's like I said this last week or the week before, it's you put it on tape, you don't want to put crappy tape on. You're interviewing for 31 other teams if you're not, if your contract's up or whatever, so you're not going to play bad. We're not just going to go out there and just, the Cowboys rolled their helmet out and we're just going to be done. Like, it's not going to be that. Right. We're going to play our hearts out and play hard football for sure.
Yeah, so I think that most guys go into that. And once you get into the flow of the game, you're not thinking that way. And it's of no benefit for these guys, really. I mean, if you know you're going to be back next year, do you want the best quarterback you can get? But on the other hand, you are putting things on tape. They're constantly evaluating you. And you could get cut not for performance reasons, but for salary reasons. Now, Cosmi's been very good lately. But, there are players who are playing for jobs. So what you want is the team to lie down. It's not going to happen. Do you want the coach to kind of engineer it so they lose? Yeah, you would like that. Would you like to see Jake Fromm start Sunday? Yeah, I would. I'd like to see that. But that's not going to happen. Let's go to the Ravens here. We've heard John Harbaugh has announced that he is going to but not play Lamar Jackson on Saturday. It's a Saturday game, 4:30 against the Steelers, and wants to have everybody well rested for the playoffs. Now, there's a question because what happened in 2019 when they were rested and lost in the first round at home to Tennessee. Tony Kornheiser, Mike Wilbon exploring this dilemma yesterday as it was announced that Jackson wasn't going to play and talking about the ramifications of that.
The last time the Ravens were the number 1 seed was 2019, and they rested their starters. Then they went out in the first playoff game they played, and despite that history, John Harbaugh announced today that Lamar Jackson will not play against Pittsburgh. Wilbon, is that the right call?
Tony, I think it is. I mean, the question is, which is riskier, navigating a 2-week bye or the possibility of injury? And we've seen Lamar Jackson miss games in December, and then the team not even really get to January for real because you don't have Lamar Jackson. He's your MVP, and God knows he's the MVP times 5 of your own team, and you have to have him. So, and you're playing the Steelers, Tony, which compounds things. I mean, the Steelers and Ravens hate each other. It's one of the cool rivalries in the NFL. And they're going to go after you. And by the way, that's what they should do. That's what football used to be. And Jim Harbaugh, his brother, knows that. And you got to say, all right, a 2-week bye is not ideal, but we prefer that to you getting busted up. So I think it's the right move. I hope he went over it with them. I hope he called Lamar in and said, look, here's what I'm thinking. Let's not play you.
Yeah, they have to have him. They are 4-9 overall without Lamar Jackson. So they have to have him healthy. It's not just 2 weeks, though, Mike. It's almost, the span between games will be almost 3 full weeks. And at that point, you wonder, does rust in fact set in? So it becomes a dicey call. There are other reasons it becomes a dicey call to me, and they involve the integrity of the game. I mean, Pittsburgh is still alive for the playoffs. If you think Baltimore is diminished without Lamar Jackson, and I know we both think that they are diminished without Lamar Jackson, and that enables Pittsburgh to win, by a convoluted formula, Pittsburgh getting in or winning this game could knock out Buffalo. Now, maybe Baltimore wants that, but if Buffalo loses and Jacksonville loses and Pittsburgh wins, then Buffalo is somehow out. So there's a lot of ramifications to this. I think it's a dicey call. The NFL has always allowed you, this is the one area where they're allowed load management. In the last game of the season, if you have nothing to play for, they've never really complained about this. I think it's a tough call. I think you have to protect Lamar Jackson. By the same token, what about the playoffs? They are not quite set. There's a lot of stuff working here.
Yeah, I would go with resting him because the last 2 years, Lamar's been out. Last 5 games of the year, the last 2 years. Now, you could have something crazy happen, and it is the Steelers. It is a division rivalry. They are known for their defense. Anything. No, rest him. Don't play him, and he seems to be okay with that. Snoop Huntley's going to get the start in the 4:30 game. Something else interesting popped up yesterday on Lamar. I'm not really aware of this. You know that this time last year it was done. No way he's coming back to Baltimore. And Jason Lockenfora, who's really plugged into the NFL, regular on Tony's show, he said, "Forget it. It's done. It's over. They botched this. He's leaving." And Lamar even said he wanted out of Baltimore. He asked to be traded. And, of course, they had, the franchise tag. They wound up putting the transition tag on him, which is probably wound up being the smartest thing to do, the way this all played out. But yesterday, you had Adam Schefter on with Rich Eisen, a couple of Michigan guys. And Eisen had said something to the effect that, the Ravens always knew they were going to get him. They were going to get him back. There's no way they're going to let him leave town. And Schefter took a little bit of issue with that. He said, and you'll hear him lay this out, that really there was no team that was willing to go the mile of guaranteed contract. That was it. They weren't going to do it for him. So there really, as you'll hear him say here, really wasn't another offer for him. The only place he was going to play was Baltimore. Here's Schefter with Eisen.
There was never a team that was even willing to challenge it. What if there was a team, Rich, whatever team it was, that went to Lamar and said, we're going to give you a 5-year, $300 million deal, fully guaranteed? What if there's a team out there that went to him and said, we're going to make you the highest paid quarterback by a lot, and we're going to make it difficult for the Ravens to match, and we want you to be here? Here's a guy, Lamar Jackson, that publicly said while we were at the owners' meetings that he wants out of Baltimore. So he wanted out and said as much. Everybody can say whatever they want post facto. Oh, he wasn't going to leave. The Ravens weren't going to match. There was never a team that was willing to even make the effort to challenge it, to make it such that the Ravens couldn't match. And I find it to be, that's like saying, well, the Cardinals aren't going to beat the Eagles. Why play the game? They're not going to win that game.
But also, it's 2 number ones that you'd have to cough up. $300 million, $300 million.
Wait, hold on.
But we're viewing this right now after seeing Lamar right now. He didn't finish the previous 2 seasons. And Adam, listen, we don't traffic in rumor. We don't traffic in rumor. But the conversation was, why wasn't he out there with his teammates? Why wasn't he with them? He was sick. I mean, there was a lot of questions about the way Lamar was handling his business behind the scenes. There was a lot of questions about Lamar being healthy. And I love the kid.
Rich, all those are fair. You raise great points there.
Okay.
And that has more to do with it than the Ravens not willing to match. There was never a team that was willing to step up to even challenge it, whether it's because of the eating habits you're suggesting or whether it's because he didn't finish either of the past 2 seasons due to a knee injury or somebody didn't think that he would be worthy of being ultra aggressive. We've seen over time teams step up when they wanted somebody to make it happen. Nobody stepped up. The Panthers stepped up for Bryce Young. That's what they did. Nobody stepped up for a variety of reasons for Lamar Jackson to even put Baltimore in a spot where they would be in a tough position where all of a sudden they'd have to match. By the way, it's 2-1s. If you sign Lamar to an offer sheet and you go to Baltimore, you say,
no, I get that. I get that with what we're seeing out of Lamar, and that's why I always thought the Ravens were never going to let him walk anyway.
By the way, they were never even presented with a difficult, never challenged.
Yeah, no choice. And this is the owners together, because I think the ownership groups got together after what Cleveland did with Deshaun Watson and guaranteed all the money and said, we can't have this. We can't topple this structure. So if anybody breaks ranks here other than Cleveland, we're going to be in big trouble. So even if somebody wanted to stick it to the Ravens a little bit, knowing that they were going to match the Lamar offer, nobody wanted to go to the fully guaranteed level, because that becomes a game changer for the NFL. They were able to get around this. Everybody said, oh, Deshaun Watson got guaranteed money, whole contract. That's it. All quarterbacks are going to get guaranteed. No, not anymore. Not anymore. And you can't really do it. You just can't do it with the injury rate. And so this was the other owners. Collusion is what it is. It really is collusion. Baseball had collusion with Peter Ueberroth like 40 years ago. Remember, Ueberroth was briefly the commissioner of baseball before Bart Giamatti replaced him, and he followed Bowie Kuhn. And Ueberroth had great success as head of the Olympics in 1984, and baseball wanted him with their new money thing and how he was able to make money in something that never made money before, or in most places doesn't make money. So he comes into baseball and he says to the other owners, "You're killing yourselves. You're all bidding against these free agents, and that's what's driving up the salary. Stop bidding for the free agents." So they did for 1 year. Andre Dawson wanted to play with the Cubs. He said, well, nobody's making me an offer. Just pay me what you want. The Cubs paid him $500,000. He was the MVP of the league. And then they started investigating and said, oh, yeah, Ueberroth told the other owners that they shouldn't pay these players. They went to court. They won. That was collusion. And the players got damages. Ueberroth was out the door. And football, you can't really do it that way, but there's kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod agreement that's not the way they're going to do business. So Lamar Jackson winds up coming back to Baltimore. He's still got a ton of money, and he did it without an agent, and he got a lot of money guaranteed. There's nobody needs to throw a benefit for Lamar, but this worked out for both sides. He got a good contract. He got, I think, what Baltimore was initially willing to give him, and he just didn't have enough leverage to get it higher than that. And he's on a team that could win a Super Bowl this year. If he goes someplace else, he may wind up in a team that couldn't win. Now, the ironic thing about Deshaun Watson is Cleveland's defense is good enough to win. They may win a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. That would be the irony of ironies. But in the end, this worked out very well for Lamar. He gets to stay, and Baltimore's a good team. Now, the eating thing is going to be interesting. We looked it up. He's 26, right? 26? So he's 26 years old. You can eat junk at 26 and not affect your body. 4 years from now, and he hits 30, we'll see. Tom Brady played until he was 45 by watching what he ate. That was a big part of it. And so that may have been some of the hesitation that by the time they get to the end of this contract, Lamar is not going to be Lamar anymore. So we'll see. Coming up, we'll be joined by Chris Price of the Boston Globe. We'll look at what's going to happen Sunday. New England, if they win, Washington would get the number 2 pick if they lose. All kinds of other ramifications if both teams lose. And we'll talk about that more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, the race to the bottom, or almost the bottom, to the number 2 pick. And it's between Washington and New England. And it's complicated. So to help us sort it all out, we have from the Boston Globe. Now, his Twitter handle says Christopher Price. I would normally call a person Chris who has the name Christopher, but for just the purposes of this conversation, what do you go by?
For you, Andy, a guy that I used to listen to back in the early 1990s, you can call me Chris.
Okay. Oh, you local?
We're
from
good friends.
You D.C.?
I spent some time in D.C. right after college.
Did you?
I listen to you, and it's a great honor to be talking sports with you today.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for helping to sort this out. I imagine the views are similar for this game for the Patriots and Washington, and, of course, you have both coaches saying, we're trying to win every game. Nobody's racing to get number 2. But it's a little more complicated, it seems, with New England, with the status of Bill Belichick. And I wonder, this being possibly his last game as coach of the Patriots, is there like an incentive, maybe even from the fan base, for him to win this game?
I think there is nothing more distasteful for Bill Belichick than to lose to the Jets under any circumstances, regardless of the context. And so I think he's going to play this one straight. I do. I think that we've talked to him a couple of times this week, and he has every intention of playing the players who deserve to play. And I think there's going to be some kids, some of the younger guys who maybe have not gotten a shot to get some significant snaps earlier in the season, get some snaps on Sunday. But he is going to play his guys who give him the best chance to win this game. Because, again, he's played it straight up all year. He really has. And the idea of tanking or kind of, losing games, not intentionally throwing games, but kind of, the race to the bottom, as you alluded to before, he has not shown any inclination to do any of that over the course of the year.
Yeah, and given his uncertain future with the team, is it in his? It wouldn't be in his best interest if it turns out to be a loss if he's going to leave, right? I mean, it's complicated in that regard. And then we have the rumors, and I don't know how closely you've been following this, but that Belichick may wind up here. And by winning the game, he helps Washington if he's going to come here. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't that be delicious?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that just be fantastic? The twist, just everything would play out like that. Look, I still believe, I am of the opinion that there is a good chance that he ends up sticking around here. Now, I think that there's a lot of things that would have to happen for that, including they would have to bring in a GM, and I don't know how strongly he feels about that, but I think that's the most palatable option for all the parties. If Robert and Bill sit down at the end of the year and say, look, Bill, we want you to stay around, but you need a GM, that's the big $64 million question, basically. If Bill would stick around to work with a general manager, I don't know if that's possible, but again, that would seem to be the best course of action for everyone here, because he's still a really good in-game coach. The X's and O's are still there. He's still sharp. The question really for me and for a lot of people who cover this team is his swings and misses, particularly in the offensive side of the ball the last couple of years. It's really set him back. And I think that as a result of that, I think they're going to need some help when it comes to the front office.
That's an old story in football. And even the guy who wanted to shop for the groceries and cook the meal didn't win a Super Bowl doing that. So there's that. We're talking to Chris Price of the Boston Globe. By the way, were you a fan of the HBO show Succession?
Oh yeah! Oh my God!
Okay, good.
Yeah. And Andy, look, I mean, this has similarities written all over it.
Well, here's my question about this, and this is what intrigues me about this in this situation. Yes, Robert Kraft owns the team, but Bill Belichick has those 6 trophies sitting in the case. I'm trying to figure out who Logan Roy is here. Who is it?
Well, you know what? If we're doing this analogy, let's look at it. I think Robert is more Logan Roy, at least in this instance. Jonathan Kraft is Kendall. And then I'm trying to figure out if Bill is more of the Swede or if he may be some other character. Right off the top of my head, I don't know if he would be another character. But, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of similarities there. And it's particularly when you look at it from a familial standpoint in relation to the Krafts, with Jonathan, who I firmly believe, if he was running the show, would have fired Bill a long time ago.
Right.
That would have happened probably after the Indianapolis game in Germany. He would not have come back. He would not have coached the team moving forward. I do think there is a level of loyalty and almost sentimentality when you talk about Robert Kraft and his relationship with Bill Belichick. And I think that's one of the things that's going to come into play here starting, when's Black Monday? January 8th, I think it is.
Yep.
I think that's going to play a role here because I think Robert likes Bill, and I think Robert acknowledges the fact that Bill was the guy who brought him 6 championship trophies. He was the guy who got the quarterback. He was the guy who put all the players on the field that, gave the franchise the level of success that it had. So I think that there's a lot to consider there when you think about that.
Yeah, there is that. And the scenario you suggest where they bring in a general manager, I mean, for a guy who's in his 70s with 6 Super Bowl trophies, I mean, he's going to answer to somebody else? Is that realistic?
That's a great question. And probably not. I think, but I think if he wants to stay here, I think that's the best course of action moving forward. If they don't agree on that, I think that's the first conversation in a series of conversations that ends with him leaving town.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't see that as. I mean, who could possibly do that? Who would have the cojones to be able to step into that role? Is there any names being thrown around for that?
No, not at this point. I think it would have to be a guy, Andy, who has a background with Bill, who is relatively new to the job of general manager. One name that I've thought is really intriguing for me, and I don't know if he'd be interested in it, but a guy like Louis Riddick, a guy who played for Bill Belichick, a guy who wants to get into the front office game and wants to be someone who can be kind of a player when it comes to personnel decisions. They have a previous relationship. He's close with Bill. He loves Bill, and the idea that they would kind of make it all work together. But in terms of an independent voice, I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, in the usual structure, the coach somewhat answers to the general manager. They work together, but in the good situation, the general manager hires the coach. Like the Camelot days here, where Bobby Beathard hired Joe Gibbs. And although Gibbs got more and more powerful over time went on, you did have this kind of chain of command. Louis Riddick, I think, is great on television. I'm sure he would make a great front office executive. But also Bill Belichick could say, I was putting together game plans when you were learning how to put on a jock. I mean, I don't understand how that would work.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, Andy, that I think is really pertinent to this conversation is I think Robert can go to Bill and say, look, when you came in here in 2000, there were, 12, 15 head coaches who had complete control over personnel. Now it's maybe, half that?
Right.
It's a big job. The job has changed, and especially for a guy who's, over 70. And so if Robert can convince Bill to say, look, take a step back. We want you to be the game day coach. We think you're the best coach in the National Football League on a day-to-day, week-to-week, play-to-play basis. You just need some help in the front office.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think that might be, and I'm not saying that it's possible here, but I think that's a path forward for all parties if Bill wants to end up staying here.
We're talking to Chris Price, Boston Globe, covers the Patriot. Two-part question on this. How important is the Don Shula record, and how important is it that Belichick gets it in New England?
Oh, it's everything with him at this point. Look, he wants to win week to week, and he wants to be competitive, and he wants to put a good team on the field. But that's the overriding thing here. If he had already passed Don Shula, I don't think we would be having this conversation. We would be talking about Gerard Mayo coaching the team this week against the Jets. So I think it's incredibly important for him, and I think it's a deeper thing. I don't want to go too far afield, but. Look, he was a guy who was raised in Eastern Maryland. He was raised at the altar of Don Shula. And Shula's comments in 2007, Deflategate, Spygate, all that kind of stuff, I think stung him and said, look, if I can't wipe you off the books with a perfect season, I'm going to do it another way. I'm going to take your all-time wins record. And so I think it means a lot to him. And I think up until this year, when you talk about the entire franchise, I think the franchise, everyone in the franchise wanted him to get the record here. Now I don't necessarily think that's the case.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing about the fan base. Does the fan base really? I mean, is there still a segment of the fan base that says we still need Bill Belichick, or is the overwhelming sentiment that you sense is, hey, it was great, you gave us those great years, time to move on, Bill?
There's a little more of the latter than the former, but there's still people out there who say, look, it's been 20 plus years of success. The guy's had one crappy year. Let's cut him a break. He botched the post-Brady quarterback scenario, on almost every level. He waited too long to sign Cam Newton, and then, he drafted, what might be the wrong guy in Mac Jones. He screwed it up completely. The post-Brady setup for him at the quarterback position. But there still is a group of people out there who say, look, it's been a year. Let's cut him some slack. They're going to have a lot of cap space in the offseason. They're going to get a top 5 pick at the worst, the highest draft pick of the Belichick era possibly. And so let's see what the guy can do. Let's see if he can build it all back again with, say, Michael Penix Jr. and, go out and grab T. Higgins and a couple offensive linemen and go from there.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, he certainly can coach, but I just wonder about the idea of him answering to somebody else and how well that works out. The other part of this, and sports radio was built on this for like a decade. Brady or Belichick? Brady or Belichick? And so Brady goes off and wins a Super Bowl someplace else, and Belichick, everybody now looks to his record, including the Cleveland days of not having Brady, how he's done. So short of finding that next Brady, I mean, is it really – I don't think it is, but do you think it may be fair in some regards to question him as a coach without Brady, how good a coach he is?
I think it's fair to question him. That being said, I think when you take his entire body of work into account, not just working as a head coach, but working as the defensive coordinator with those great Giants teams in the 1980s, when you talk about his ability to put all of those great players around Tom Brady in the early days of that dynasty, his ability to go out and draft a Rob Gronkowski, his ability to go find guys like, Mike Vrabel, turn over a rock and discover, Rodney Harrison, those types of guys, I think he still deserves credit for. I think that, again, though, you talk about where he is now and you talk about the personnel decisions he's made on the offensive side of the ball the last 3, 4, 5 years. I think it's fair to question those. I think it's fair to question him as a personnel guy at this stage of his career. But I think when it comes to him being a coach, when it comes to his bona fides, I think he's, if he's not number one, he's certainly 1A behind Shula, at least at this point.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt, where he stands on the all-time, he's on that Mount Rushmore for sure. It's just that it's been an odd way. And, I was covering the Giants when he was the defensive coordinator, and Bill Parcells never let his assistants talk, so nobody really knew him. But he goes to Cleveland, he gets fired. The Browns move here after he gets fired, and everybody goes, well, yeah, they got rid of that guy, so, now they got Ted Marchibroda. They should be in great shape. And so, he's always kind of, as stayed away from, accolades and the spotlight and so forth. I mean, is he comfortable where he is with his legacy now? Do you sense that?
I think so. I think that the Shula record would be the perfect period at the end of, the sentence. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, he is comfortable with where he is. He does lighten up from time to time still, even in, seasons like this one. But I do. I think he's comfortable with his legacy. I think he's comfortable with who he is. And I think that, he's going to be remembered as, like I said before, if not the greatest coach, one of the greatest coaches of all time. So, so I ultimately answer your question. Yeah, I do think he's comfortable with his legacy as it sits right now.
And is it just to get the record? Is that will be the limit on how he coaches? Which would address this question: does he want to go to a team that's? I'm sure he does. Wants to go to a team that wins now rather than trying to rebuild one, which is where probably most of the openings are going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's going to be the really interesting thing, Andy. And I've had this discussion with colleagues before. It's not like he's, it's not like there's a Phil Jackson type of situation,
right.
Where he can just kind of parachute in and be the last piece of, a championship puzzle. He's going to need a couple of years of the jobs that are open. He's going to need a couple of years to not quite rebuild completely, but to get them to where they might be a Super Bowl contender. So it's going to be fascinating with him. It really is. I mean, the whole franchise, the last 20-plus years has been fascinating, but how they decide to go about, finding a way to build it back, and whether or not Bill's a part of it, and where Bill ends up, and where, Bailey Zappi ends up, and where, how, Gerard Mayo and, the construction of the coaching staff, how it all kind of comes together, man. It's a fascinating franchise. It's never disappointed, and I think that's going to be the case moving forward, regardless of whether or not Bill's in the picture.
Last thing, because we could never tell here, because FedEx Field the last few years has turned out to be the greatest home field for the visitor, and it will be again Sunday when the Cowboys come here. But you're going to have a home game there against the Jets, and for the fan base, the best thing for them is to lose the game. I'm sure a lot of season ticket holders, people don't give them up. What do you sense in terms of cheering during the game if the Patriots are, like here, we're watching in horror as Jacoby Brissett came off the bench and almost beat the Jets. That was a road game. You're going to have a home game. What do you think the crowd sentiment is going to be with the Patriots possibly, losing or winning that game?
First of all, I got to say, Jacoby Brissett's my guy. I loved him when he was here. Great quarterback, pros pro, won in every system. I would love to see him back in New England as a backup next year. That being said, I think there are a couple different things at play here. I think, first of all, the possibility of Belichick's final game, there are going to be cheers regardless. And I think that, they might do something. The other thing, too, is there's a guy on the roster, Matthew Slater, who's been on this team for 16 years, probably going to the Hall of Fame as a special teamer. Great special teamer, maybe one of the most beloved players outside of, Brady, kind of the Gronkowski, that whole kind of nexus. This is most likely his last game. And so I think there is going to be, regardless of wins, losses, whatever the case may be, I think there will be some overriding warm feelings toward this team. I think that they're going to cheer. And I think that there are probably going to be more people in the stands on Sunday who believe that, hey, look, let's cut them some slack. They've had one lousy year in the span of 2 decades. I'm okay with that. It's regardless, the difference between the third overall pick, say, and the 5th overall pick. I think we're okay with that. So I think there's going to be more. There's going to be more cheers and boos. I'll put it that way if they're winning.
Okay, and I think it's playing at the same time is the swing game, as Steve Kornacki put it, where you got Atlanta playing New Orleans, and Washington wants New Orleans to win, and the Patriots want the Falcons to win. Do you think when that appears on the scoreboard, that'll draw any reaction?
Yes, that will draw some reaction. Yeah, that will definitely draw a reaction. There's going to be one eye on the field, and everyone's going to be kind of checking their phones or checking the scoreboard as to what's going on around the league.
Yeah, that's right. That's showing my age, as a matter of fact, because now you can check your phone. Used to have to be the out-of-town scoreboard. How come they're not posting those scores? Great. Hey, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to talk to you.
My pleasure. Take care. We'll talk soon, hopefully.
Hopefully, yes. Thank you. That's Chris Price of the Boston Globe, who's quite good, very good, and interesting insight into, this idea of Bill Belichick taking orders, not orders, but having is it a superior? In some ways, a general manager is a superior to a coach, and that's one of the reasons it never really worked out well here, that Martin Mayhew had to answer to Ron Rivera. And when I was covering the Giants, and they were really good, they had a structure there where Bill Parcells was the coach and George Young was the general manager. And George Young had hired Bill Parcells. And as they were getting better and better, Parcells and Young butted heads. And who stayed? George Young. Bill Parcells left with his 2 Super Bowl rings. So that would be really something if he agrees to. But as Chris told us, he does want the Shula record. And it would be better for him to get it in New England for his legacy, which he may care about. I don't know, but his legacy, to have it as a Patriots coach rather than a Chargers coach for what is really the secondary team by miles in the LA area. Not that they even care about pro football, but the Rams are much higher on the landscape than the Chargers. Is he going? Does it have the scent of Joe Namath playing for the Rams? Does it have that feel to it? And it might. So it's all kinds of interesting scenarios, as we say.